doing things that you need to do yourself, and that all that comes down to being hands-on, running hand tools, using power tools. It's all an experience. Turning it on and using something.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast, a regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by my former shop teacher, Roy Horne. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Mr. Horne, you've been telling me to call you Roy. That's very difficult for me, but I'm going to try to do that from now on.
Please do.
It is a pleasure to have you on the show, and it's a delight to see you. It's been a long time.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's nice to be here or see you again.
Can you tell me when you retired from being a teacher? I'm not sure I know. And then what did you do? What have you been doing since then?
Well, I retired in 1997. And but what I did then was I continued to work for the school as a maintenance department.
You did a lot of the carpentry projects, right? The respective buildings would need.
Yes. Anytime we have mostly summer work. And then anytime they had that problem during the school year, then I would come in and do that too.
Did you like doing that stuff?
Oh, yeah, I really did. Yeah,
because you got to see your coworkers and, stay in it, right?
Sure. Well, at that time, I didn't really know many of them because they were all now hiring new people. And you know how that goes. Your old friends are gone, and now you're trying to make new ones, and you really don't get a chance to see them.
What kind of projects would they have you doing?
Well, just fixing up. Maybe somebody needed a cupboard. Somebody needed racks to put things on, bookshelves, bookcases, that kind of thing in the room, so that the kids could do it. And holders for the iPads, or not iPads, but their computers.
Sure. What made you go into teaching, and where did you study?
I studied at California State Teachers College.
Which is part of the Pennsylvania system, we should tell folks, right?
Yes, it is. And at that point, I did some research, and it had probably one of the best IA departments going in Pennsylvania.
And when you say IA, I assume you mean industrial arts, right?
Industrial arts, that is correct. But the real reason I went there is because of football. I had played football for 7 years in high school, and then all of a sudden we wound up getting an offer from California State Teachers College to come down and play, and they would pay for my education, or part of my education. So my mother and dad at that time, we were not affluent people, let's put it that way. So we decided that would be the best route for me to do. And as soon as I got there, I found out that was the best decision that I could make.
What made you choose the IA discipline?
Well, because I had already set myself up to go to Williamsport and go in there and do something, or join a carpentry school up there. I had the shop class when I was a junior in high school, and I really enjoyed it. So I figured I'd do something where I could use my hands and use my talent, whatever that happened to be, as doing it in that position, because I had been around a lot of home building, which happened in the area where we were living at the time. And I would go up there and watch these guys work and see what they were doing, and started talking to a couple of them and asking questions. And I got very interested in that. So I looked into doing that as a career after school. So
were the folks in your family handy? Did you have any exposure to that kind of stuff when you were a kid?
My dad could do just about anything as far as fixing it. If something broke, he would take care of it. I had an automobile that would break down quite often. as you know, whenever you're younger, you can't afford a new one. So what happened was that's how I learned to work on cars, is by fixing my own vehicle.
Right.
And at that time, you could fix your own vehicle. Now that's almost impossible.
It's definitely harder. I totally agree. So, what is the current discipline for industrial arts now? Are there still programs that teach teachers how to become shop teachers?
Now, at this point, I looked up that information. And, what they have called it now is technology education. And if you let me, I'm going to read what they say underneath of that they're training the teachers to do now.
Please.
To do that. And it says, gain mastery of computer applications and evaluate social, cultural, economic, and environmental impacts of technology. And that is what will be on your certificate whenever you graduate.
That doesn't sound like the same thing to my ear.
It doesn't sound like the same thing to me either. And that was one of the reasons I actually retired, is because I really did not want to invent the new wheel. I was in my late 60s or mid 60s at that particular time. And I figured, well, I only have a few more years to go. But so what I did is I took a class up at Penn State University. And I took it for 3 weeks. And at the end of 3 weeks, I had a shoebox full of cards that read into a reader. And what it produced was an ashtray. And it was all done. And I finally looked, I said, why do I want to do this?
So for our younger listeners who may be unfamiliar with programming punch cards, you used to do computer programs with these like manila cards, like a heavy folder, and they'd have, hundreds or thousands of holes punched in them, right? And you'd have to put them into this machine in the right order.
Right.
Wow. So when was that, Roy? Was that in the 80s, I presume?
Yeah, that was in, let's see, it would be probably 85, 86.
Yeah. So I graduated in 1989, and the high school shop programs, in my observation, had few participants. You spent part of your day at the junior high teaching to seventh graders, where you and I had our interaction, and part of your day teaching mechanical drawing to high school students in another building at the high school. Were you worried about the future of those programs at the time? Did it seem like they were on the way out?
Well, I wasn't really worried about the program until like the mid 90s, simply because I had taught 2 classes at the senior high school. One was called outdoor living, and the other one was engineering drawing.
Were you worried that they were going to close the shop and move out all the machinery?
Sure, I did. And that actually happened. And again, that's one of the reasons that I did retire, simply because what they did then is I retired. As I said, I was still working for the maintenance department. So we wound up doing a lot of the renovations that or helping with the renovations.
They turned the shop class into a different classroom, right?
Yeah, I sure did. That's now the band room. And they took all the machinery and everything and put it in storage. And we still had access to that storage area so that we could use it. And then they started hiring new people. So
did you talk about with either fellow industrial arts teachers or your colleagues at the Quaker Valley, where you were a teacher, about this situation? Were there concerns about taking this hands-on opportunity away from students?
Oh, sure, they were. A lot of them said, but they really weren't that worried about it because they were about 10 years or about 5, 6, 7 years older than me. And they were thinking about retirement in a year or two. So it really wasn't a concern to them right then.
And do you know if any of the schools in the area of Western Pennsylvania still have like high school or junior high shop class? I know there are vocational programs, of course. Usually the students go to a different school, but do any of them have shop in the building?
There are in some of the big schools where they have quite a bit of capital and quite a bit of money, or I mean, students around. Yeah, they are all surrounding us. They have that program in
Mm.
still there.
When I think back to some of the awesome things we did there, I did forging, with a gas forge. I cast aluminum and sand molds. I got to run a metal lathe. I got to use a metal cutting bandsaw. I got to use scroll saw. It's like, I can't imagine parents and teachers like allowing kids to do this kind of stuff today. Did it seem odd to you at the time, or was it just normal?
No, that's just normal. That's the way we were brought up in California. We had to do a project was our passing grade. And if we didn't do that project, you had to reschedule it for the next semester. And so there was many a night spent in the foundry at night, ramming up a mold so that because the first one didn't work well. Then machining and doing all the other stuff. So we became very familiar with these tools and machines. So we wanted to introduce, the kids to them, not on a big scale, but on a very small scale, just so they knew what they were. If they heard terminology, they could understand what was there.
Were there ever any serious accidents in any of your classes or any of your colleagues that you can recall?
No, we never had anything happen in any of our schools. When I was student teaching, the first day or second day that I walked into metal shop, the teacher was doing a demonstration. And then as soon as he finished, he had one of the kids come over and we'll start working on a metal lathe that you were talking about. And he was doing some cutting. And a chip got stuck, and he stuck his hand in there, and it took part of his finger. So I wound up with the class for the remainder of the time, and he wound up going to the hospital. That was the only major thing that I ever saw or ever happened on in any of our shop situations.
That must have been a valuable lesson, though, right? Because it did demonstrate almost immediately that the stakes are high, right?
Oh, it certainly was. The kids all were in amazement, and so was I. So
when schools started shutting down their shops in favor of computer labs and other classrooms in this period, your colleague, Mr. Cowan, who taught me metal shop, started teaching computer classes too. Did you feel pressure to learn and teach computer stuff? Because that seemed like where that educational space and resources were moving to, in my observation.
Yeah, well, at this time, that's when I took the class at Penn State. I figured I'm going to take a look at this and see what it really is all about.
Had you had any exposure to a computer prior to that?
None.
None.
Not at all.
What did Mr. Cowan? He was quite adept at teaching us kids like basic programming and stuff. Like he must have learned that relatively recently, because as I recall, he was even older than you were, right? He would have gone through school a decade earlier, I would guess.
Yes, he did. His brother taught computer at California. So he had the edge on that. So I would imagine every day or every weekend he'd probably spend with him, and finally got the right to do that, or to go ahead to do it.
Wow. Do you think the economy of Western Pennsylvania and other Rust Belt areas in the 70s, 80s had anything to do with the abandonment of high school shop programs? To explain what I'm talking about, at the time, so many good paying hands-on jobs were moving to southern states and overseas. I think it would have been easy for school boards and administrators to see computers and higher learning as a safer, higher earning path for students. Do you think that was part of the rationale with what happened?
Not sure it was, because even they were offering grants for schools. If you could, then you get the person to write the correct grant, they could wind up getting stimulus money or money for computers and everything brought in. So they figured, well, we have to cut programs somewhere. So that's where they began to cut art classes, music classes, and shop classes, because the inventory that you need for those are sometimes come pretty high. And the money they saved there was probably put into, other things, and then they went the way of technology.
I thought about that when I was thinking of questions to ask you, and it had to make an impact. I can tell you from my own experience, it certainly pushed my parents to push me into getting a college degree, despite my reservations and even resistance, but they finally convinced me. When we spoke on the phone about you being on the show, you told me that I told you that I made the observation, how do you know if you like something if you never get to try? And I bring this up because there were a lot of little kids, 12, 13 years old, who got exposed to things that they may have never done in the shop classes and other sewing cooking classes that I went to as a seventh grader. And you told me that everybody needs the hands-on. Why do you think hands-on learning like shop class, sewing class, and cooking class, what does it do for students?
Well, like you exactly said, it gives them an experience of something that they may not get or may not have had before. And that's how you learn. You learn from doing, you learn from your mistakes, you learn from doing things that you need to do yourself. And that all that comes down to being hands-on, running hand tools, using power tools. It's all an experience. Turning it on and using something, and when that happens, you remember what it was all about.
Do you think that kids are missing out today because they don't have these opportunities, or do you think parents should be providing this kind of enrichment some other way?
I think a lot of people do that simply because of the fact that they have problems at home and they need to get it fixed, and some of them can't afford to call somebody in every time there is a problem, and maybe it's a very small problem, but it can be fixed easily if somebody knows a little bit about what's going on and about how to use some simple tools, screwdrivers, hammers, wrenches, and yes, I think it's a very, very satisfying thing to do for kids.
I would agree. I can tell you, I took your seventh grade shop class, and then I took a year of industrial arts, which was a half a year metal shop and a half a year wood shop in ninth grade. And I can tell you, it was the absolute highlight of my day. I so looked forward to going there and making stuff. And you and Mr. Cowan and Mr. Namella, my wood shop teacher, were always very accommodating in giving me access, outside of normal class hours to work on more elaborate projects. And I'm so grateful to all of you for that experience. It really, really put me on a course that I could have never imagined with my life. It is something I owe you all a great deal.
Well, you are now repaying us. Well, me anyway. I'm sorry that Mr. Cowan and Mr. Namella are both gone now. And but I enjoy your magazine. I enjoy the tips that you have in there. And I enjoy your work on the people that you get giving us information on the new materials coming out. It's amazing how quickly things change.
Especially in the last couple decades, right?
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on our educational system in this country? You've had a long time to think about it, both as a teacher and as an observer. What do you think we're getting right, and what aren't we getting right?
Well, I think the educational system is staying up with the way technology is going now. And I think they're doing an excellent job of doing what they're doing there. But I should say, in the meantime, what they're doing is they're taking things away from the kids that we ourselves had done before. They don't teach cursive writing anymore. They do not teach, face-to-face conferences or talks. Everything now comes over similar to what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
They have to write their reports on a computer. They can't use a typewriter anymore. And I think the kids are missing out on quite a bit.
Can you tell me about your own house? Do you have any new or lingering problems that you're either happily or unhappily ignoring, or need Fine Homebuilding's expertise?
I'm going to say this quietly because my wife, no, she's not listening, but the windows that we have been at, we've been in this house now for 15 years, which I drew the plans for and had built. But we wanted the windows that had the dividers on the inside of the double pane. And at the time, they were just coming out with them. And we would have to have waited another couple of months. And also the cost was quite high at that particular time. But it was a good company and a good window. But so we got the same window, but I told her that with these windows, I will take out the pane or the dividers for you every time that we need to clean them. That's what I have been doing, and also repairing them once they break too.
So you have these little grids that snap into the sash, right?
Yes.
And it's a hassle, right? And they're flimsy, right?
Oh yes.
You told me, you just said, and this was quite a bomb you dropped on me here. You designed your own home. Is that is that correct?
Yes.
And what did you how is it? What is it like?
Oh, it's very nice. It's on one level.
Huh?
We've got 2 bedrooms. The third room is the room I'm in right now, which is our TV room. And, a nice spacious, we have about 1,800 square feet.
Is it modern aesthetic or is it ranchy?
It's ranchy type.
And did you put brick or wood siding on it?
We have brick up to grade, brick in the front, and then vinyl on the remainder of the house.
So if someone wanted to become a shop teacher, are those programs still available? You mentioned what is described as a shop teacher, but like, can you get a certificate in like teaching carpentry or metal shop, like what you did?
You know what? I've had the opportunity to go back to California because of the football. They invite us back once every 5-10 years to enjoy the seasons we had, and we had one undefeated season, so that's the reason they do it.
Neat.
And then when I do that, I wind up going down to look at the buildings and right now I haven't been back in about 7 years. But the building that I used to attend in is no longer there. They have torn it down and put another building in, which is all technology now there. Now, they still do have an area where they have, and I could look in the windows as I walk by it, the tools that we used to use, the drill presses, the lathes. So there is some hands-on work being done also along with that. And I think it's because of terminology. If you're going to speak the deal about industrial arts, you need to know what the terminology means.
And these graduates would have had no exposure to this earlier in their lives, is my guess. Like you or I would have, right? You and I would have known at 15 years old what all those machines were in the metal shop and the woodworking shop, right? Correct.
Yes, unless the schools still have those programs that are offered, but they may be an elective program, not a required.
I think you'd agree that for, a couple generations, we have sorely neglected getting people to do trade work. And now we are faced with a crisis, a shortage of plumbers, carpenters, electricians, HVAC technicians, the list goes on and on. How do you see that being resolved? Is there a solution?
You know what? That's funny you ask, because I just saw on TV here, I think a couple of days ago or even last week, they're building a house with a computer completely from the foundation up.
Does it look like it was made by a computer, Roy?
And that's got to interfere with a lot of things that you do. Now, are you worried about any of this with your work and with your type of
Well,
you're staying on top of all the new stuff coming out?
It's a good question, and I'm the first to admit that I think anyone who's in the publishing business has concerns, right? But I am heartened because I feel like people are going to need niche information for their hobbies and their vocations, right? And how they get that is going to change, I'm sure, with technology. But I don't think the need for good information about home building, for example, is ever going to go away, because you can't outsource that. But if robots are making CNC concrete houses and there are no people there, then what am I doing, right?
Right. Yeah, I would like to have one of those robots if that happens, but I don't think I will see that. I think you're in pretty good hands for a while here.
I hope so. I feel like we need to do a better job of helping young people be introduced to this, and not everyone is going to be a tradesperson or a contractor, what have you. But I think there is definitely something to be gained from exposing people to that kind of work. And boy, I can tell you now, the only people I know that have any money are plumbers. It's like,
well, see, they're needed. So,
and I think you'd agree. I've said it before on the show, but when you need a plumber, you're happy to see them, right? That is an important job. And it troubles me that our tradespeople in this country don't get the respect that they absolutely deserve.
Right. No, I agree with that. Yes. They put in quite a few hours, and it's not, yeah.
It's hard work too. I think, we at Fine Homebuilding, we tend to romanticize like what home building is like. And for a lot of folks who are our audience, who are enthusiasts, it's what they do for enjoyment. But there's a whole other segment of the audience who are professionals, and it's more, it's oftentimes like any job. It's a ton of hard work, and there are a lot of conflicting interests.
Certainly is, and it's tough on the body too.
It is. That's something, that is also true. So interestingly, I may have never told you this, but my dad told me to become an industrial arts teacher. But I think that would have been at exactly the wrong time to take up that, discipline.
Yes. That was
or not, because maybe there wouldn't have been any.
Well, that's true. Unless you got into a school that still hung on to, or still was affluent enough that they could hang on to the equipment they had.
Yeah. Anything you want to tell or ask our listeners before we part company, Mr. Horne?
Well, the only thing I would like to say is this, with address it to parents and grandparents both, that encourage your children to explore all activities and programs that they can, and keep them busy. Let them widen their experiences, and let them enjoy their choices of life and career.
That was lovely. That was fantastic. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and it is without hyperbole, I say that I am so indebted to you, and I wish Mr. Cowan and Mr. Namella could be here, and I would tell them the same thing. But thank you very much for all you've given me, and I hope that there are other kids or students of their shop teachers who can get to say the same thing, and I feel like they would feel good that they could say that, and I feel lucky to have been able to talk to you today.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and good luck to you.
Thanks, man. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Roy Horne for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. And Roy Horne, thank you so much for everything.
Well, thank you, Pat, for getting it here. Thank you very much. Take care.
It was awesome.